Hey, it's Chris, Liege Games. Let's talk Mythic Battles Ragnarok. What do you need to know? How do you feel about it? Is it right for you? Should you be backing it? Should you be looking elsewhere? I'm a big fan. I'm backing. Personally, I'll write I'll put that right out there, right at the beginning. I'm backing. It's just more of a matter of how much am I getting everything or am I going to piecemeal it? That's more of my question. Now let's talk about it just in general for a second. If you're not familiar with Mythic Battles Pantheon at all, that is the precursor to Mythic Battles Ragnarok. Mythic Battles Pantheon is the Greek version of this 1v1, essentially, skirmish type game, miniatures, battling on a map for control, where you're drafting units for a certain number of points and putting them head to head in competition. Ragnarok is the Norse mythology pantheon version of that, taking it straight from the lore and trying to be truer to it than many other games out there. I'm not going to say it's absolutely true. I'm not familiar with all the nuances and the exact history of things, but I can tell you that they are much more true in the depiction than several other IPs and videos, movies out there that you may be more familiar with. Mythic Battles Pantheon has two iterations. They did the first Kickstarter, and then they did a 1.5 version with an upgrade. Mythic Battles Ragnarok is a spin-off, a play-off, a solo, separate, standalone expansion to that. And there are already talks that there will be future expansions in the form of the Egyptian deities in the future. So is this one right for you? Let's take a look. So here you go. This is Mythic Battles Ragnarok. It's already over $1 million. It's more, like I said prior to the campaign, how many millions it's going to raise. The reason I'm putting out my video now as opposed to waiting till later is because I will tell you, right at the beginning of this, I do not think the value is drastically going to change because they've already shown a significant portion of what is going to be in the campaign in terms of expansions and prices, as opposed to several of their previous campaigns, as opposed to many of the other big miniature companies that will often string them along throughout the campaign. This is also not a long campaign. So what do you need to know right now? Like I said, now it markets itself as a 2 to 4 player skirmish game, like I mentioned, but like I said already, it's really a 1v1 where it shines. It does have a free-for-all mode. It does have a 3-player mode. It does have a teams 2v2 mode. And if you look online, the best mode is by far and away the 1v1, then the teams and the free-for-all, followed by the 1v1v1, the 3-player game, as with most skirmish games. So that's not anything in terms of a drastic departure from what you may already know. And frankly speaking, I applaud them for doing this route of having all of the accoutrements out at the beginning. I much prefer campaigns like that. I think it's just more genuine. Hey, this is what we're going to offer you. I like that approach. I prefer it. And I give them kudos for doing it because a lot of the other big miniature companies aren't doing that. Ragnarok, if you're not familiar, Ragnarok is sort of the apocalypse in the Norse mythology, if you will. They do have pre-scripted adventures, campaigns, quests, battles that you can do, just like in Pantheon. And that is the other mode that I did not mention, where you can be AI-based, or you can be competitive there as well. So here you get a sense, and this doesn't really adequately display, but these are massive boxes. These are Gloomhaven-esque size boxes. And now you can see where I'm pledging, and I'll talk about that later. But here are the stretch goals, and you're going to see just more and more of these come. And similar with the previous Mythic Battles, the core pledge is going to get you basically probably a sized box equal to the core box to begin with, which, diving in a little bit to the pledge levels here, is by far and away the best value. If you talk to people who have the core game, if you talk to people who have played it, you can do an extreme amount of play and depth and variety with just the core and the stretch goals with just this core pledge from Pantheon. And I am assuming people were sort of downplaying it prior to the campaign, but I am assuming that the value is going to be very akin to the Pantheon pledge in terms of quantity, depth, variety. Now, when you look over here at Mythic Battles Pantheon for a second, let's talk about the comparison. Let's do a little bit of a deeper dive. The stretch goals were 87 additional miniatures. That's a ton. Are we going to see as many on this side of things? I don't know, but with the way they're spacing them out right now, as in smaller amounts, not the CMON style, where they are getting slowly larger, and all of a sudden they're 40, 80, 100,000, you're seeing them stay a little closer, which means I think they just have a lot more in stock. Now, are they true stretch goals? That's a whole nother issue. They're probably not, but depending on the day of the week, depending on the campaign, I have mixed feelings about that. You can see all the stretch goals already. We're already over 16 stretch goals with something along the lines of 20 to 22 miniatures. So a quarter of the way there. And you're getting a little bit of everything. Now here are the pledge levels. 119 for that pledge level. And they are doing the reprint. That is the other thing you need to know. But you are also getting Atlas, and that's probably why it's a little bit more. The other controversy, and I'll talk about this in a few minutes, is that, as you can see, the VAT and the US sale taxes are included. And that's become a hot button issue on a lot of the bigger campaigns lately. As you can see here on the Pantheon page, $119 got you the core and the stretch goals. So it's very similar, and you're getting essentially the Atlas for $16 extra. They're throwing it in there. So again, very similar. You're not paying a huge markup like some of these campaigns will do between first runs and second runs, or second runs and third runs. So again, it's a great deal. If you just wanted that, great. Then you get the option, and this is probably, if you want the most bang for your buck, this is probably it beyond getting one of the core sets, is getting just both of the cores with both of the stretch goals. It is. It frankly is. This is going to be the most money, the most miniatures, the most play, dollar for play, dollar for miniatures, period. No questions. But, I mean, this is still $240 before shipping. And shipping's probably going to run you somewhere along the lines of $30 to $50, depending on where you are in the world. You just need to be aware of that. Then, they go straight to the big boys. The Yggdrasil pledge, the all-in pledge. And I like, again, having this all-in pledge out there right away. And it is $299, which, if you're looking and comparing it to the all-in for Pantheon, is considerably less. It's $200 less. And that's because there is just less. The Pantheon had 4 big box expansions. 4 $60 expansions with a bunch of other stuff. Bunch of other smaller expansions. And I'm not sure if that's reflective of them just having a lot more stuff in the Pantheon and the Greek mythology side of things, or they're just not diving as deep on the Norse side of things and they're sticking a little bit more focused. I don't know. Or are we going to see a 1.5 of Ragnarok, or, a second Ragnarok at some point in the future that's going to have a few more of these smaller or bigger expansions? Because as you can see here with the pricing, there's only one big one at $60. The rest are all 20. But the 20s are more like the Atlas expansion that I mentioned above, because you're basically getting one miniature, one guy, one Titan, the Pantheon equivalent, for it. And as with a lot of Kickstarters, that is where often the bigger profit comes from, is from these expansions, not necessarily the core. The core they might even lose money on, but it's these that they're making money on. It's just to what degree and how much. Then, obviously, it also comes with all of the other little trinkets and accoutrements that I mentioned. You get the special dice, you get the card sleeves, and you get the art book. Now, this is why I am personally wavering. Because knowing that I'm going to be getting the Ragnarok pledge, and I already have almost everything for Pantheon, you need some of these sleeves so that you cannot be able to tell the cards easily apart. You need them to be able to mix them together. And I don't have any sleeves. And so if I'm going to get sleeves, and I'm going to maybe get most of these expansions, this pledge then becomes more of a value, even though I may not want all of these small expansions. And that's where really the math is going to come in handy at the end. Now, interestingly, I don't see a scenario book like they did with Pantheon. They just have the art book. And I'm not sure if that has any of those extra scenarios in that was so hyped with the first campaign. So again, here, a little bit of what you're getting. And some of these sculpts are great. I know a lot of people like some of these. A lot of people don't. There's a lot of criticism about the Loki one, especially when you go so deep within mythology on some of these others. And then you kind of do, I think, as has been referred, the MCU version of Loki. But anyway, the monsters look great. And monsters are great. I think some of the humanoids are less impressive, especially with some of the stretch goals, but that's a side note. Double-sided boards, also amazing. 2 double-sided boards. Now, as with Catacombs, 3rd edition, they replace them eventually with playmats. And I prefer the neoprene playmats, but it's going to cost save, and it's not a dexterity, so I don't need to worry about the edges ripping up on a game like this. The artwork is just fantastic. It comes with all of this stuff that you can see. Again, the stuff is not the issue. They even have a rule book. So any questions that you have should be easily able to be answered by either reading the rule book or checking out what Pantheon and how Pantheon played. And there's enough out there with that. They even talk about, here you go, what you can do. Skirmish mode, you have a certain number of recruitment points, and you just choose. Or adventure mode, where you're bringing special rules and recruitment methods to get and to achieve certain legends and myths depending on the scenario. And they talk about how to, the cards are different, and the Jarls, which are your troops, and your deck, and how to play a little bit. So you get all of that, what the dashboard does, the dice, everything. You get to see the size of the miniatures. Again, that's been a real strength of them. So here is the big box expansion for Asgard. That is the one big box. Pantheon had these 4. They had Poseidon, Hera, Hephaestus, and the Rise of the Titans. Asgard only has this one, and you can say, why are you having 2 of the biggest names that people are familiar with from the MCU, outside of, Thor and Loki, Heimdall and Odin, essentially, in this game, in this box? And there are some cool stuff. So I think that is probably the best value of the expansions, just with all of these things. Now, I know nothing about the Ragnar, but at least you're getting more miniatures here with this than you are with the other $20 monster Titan equivalents here. And I'm not sure if that's a selling point, because the Titan box maybe didn't sell as well, and I think there were some balance issues with Titans, and so maybe they're breaking it up to make it more attractive here. I don't know, but all of these are ridiculously cool looking, and all of these are a buy for me. It's really the Ragnar one that I think is the biggest question, and because I just know less about it. But each of these also, if you're looking, comes with 2 scenarios. So again, something to be aware of. It's not only adding the miniature and the cards, it's adding things to do with them. Card sleeves. There you go. Now, they go through what do you need to know in terms of the changes. And this is not only to help more with the balance, but this is also for people like myself who have Pantheon and are going to be smashing them together. So how do you do that? How do you make sure there's not more balance issues? Because you always worry about, with the expansion and a new thing like this, or with games, with video games, with any of this, power creep. Are the second iteration of these going to be stronger and make a lot of the first ones less powerful and less useful? And so if you're fighting, a whole Pantheon versus a whole Ragnarok, there's no question of who's going to win. That is what they're trying to avoid here. So they're changing the talents. They're changing the terrains. So they're changing some of the talents. They're getting rid of things like phalanx that maybe would be too powerful or skew the balance too much. And they're just simplifying some of that stuff out. They're changing the way you climb. They're changing some of the 3-player rules. Like I mentioned, noticing that it's a little bit of a weakness. And they're changing how Titans and gods, in the Ragnarok side of things, are going to be able to interact. And how you balance because of the power differential potentially between some of those battles. And again, there's videos out there, so you can check those out. Here's the shipping. Shipping is about what you'd expect. You know, for the first top half of anywhere in the EU and North America, it's about what I would expect. The bottom half, as always, is just I'm sorry in advance for you guys. I feel for you. I really do. Now that we've looked at it, what is your best interest? Honestly, if you've been looking at this game at all, your best interest is to get one of the core boxes. And which core box you get is probably more to your preference because they're both going to run you the exact same price. They're both going to get you probably by the end of this campaign about the same amount of stuff. So it's going to be more which one's more attractive to you, which one is more in hone with your personal preferences, which one do you just like better, period. And if you really want more stuff than you can ever deal with, $250, $260, $70 within shipping included to get both of the core boxes is more than you'd ever need for your collection. For people like myself who have some of the other stuff, it's again more of what am I all going to get? Because personally, I don't really like one or two of those small expansions. So for me, I'm looking at potentially passing on some of this extra stuff. But the bundling is going to potentially make me more tempted. And that's where it really is. How much of the savings is that bundle? So when you talk the savings in that bundle, they say $299. Okay, so you are getting, just like they said, the sleeves for free. You're getting these 50 sets of sleeves, which is a ton, for free. That's enough to get the all-in pledge completely covered. Now the problem is for someone like myself, I'm going to have to get more. So would it be more beneficial if I cut out some of these small expansions and spent that money on sleeves because I clearly maybe don't want this one and then went that way? I don't know. It's person to person dependent, and that's going to be the temptation because this is going to be a lot of money, and it's just how much money you want to spend. The other thing you have to be aware of in this game is this is a card management, card-driven skirmish type game. There is some luck. There is some mitigation. There is drafting to it in beginning with. So there is some randomization of the units and the cards that you're getting. That differs than something else out there like The Edge, Dawnfall. You know, where you've got your pre-constructed army, you've got your pre-constructed deck, or you have the ability to customize your deck depending on how you want to make it stronger or weaker depending on what you're going up against. And you don't necessarily have as much customization in this, potentially, as you would with some of those other skirmish games. Now, it is card-driven, just like something like Super Fantasy Brawl. And Super Fantasy Brawl is, you know, the whole thing is no dice. And this has dice, although it is card-driven. Again, you have to be aware, if you don't want dice, this is not going to be the skirmish game for you. Because it utilizes it in the attacks, in the rolls, period. And that's okay, but you need to be aware. Now you see it being compared to other skirmish type games out there, like the ones I mentioned. And the fun factor with this game, I don't think can be understated. It's just fun with these powers. The powers are not super complicated. They're not super overhead in terms of learning or relearning. It's intuitive. And I think that's sometimes the problem with other games where the powers are so complicated or there's so much of a learning curve that getting it to the table is more of a chore. Now, I'm not going to tell you that getting it to the table is easy because, I mean, it's a big setup teardown sometimes. But if you're looking for something, this is near or at the top of the skirmish games 1v1 with miniatures with variable powers comparatively on the scene. So if you have been tempted or if you have been looking to get into it, yes, it is going to cost you triple digits to get into it in the first place. You're going to have more content for it than you would imagine. And so the question more is just, is that price point too high for you to come in at? And for the amount of stuff you're getting, honestly, they could probably charge near $200. And I think people would still be super interested based on the reviews, the thoughts, the overall appeal and feeling that this game has produced from people that have it out there. If you like these types of games, if you don't mind a little bit of dice rolling with mitigation, this is probably the best. But if you're looking for something that is, you know, pure no luck, this is not going to appeal to you. If you want something that's a lower price point to entry, this is not going to appeal to you. Those are the two big things that are automatically going to strike it off your list immediately. Now, I have not looked at the new rulebook for Ragnarok. The old rulebook for Pantheon is okay. That's the other thing. Sometimes learning straight from the rulebook is not the easiest, but it's also better than ones I've seen. So if anything, I would really hope that they're going to be having a professional review it in both French and English, not just a translation. And you have to realize that there are a lot of things with the base Pantheon, like the terrains that I mentioned at the beginning, that it is going to take some looking up. It is going to take some getting used to. So it's not a lifestyle game, if you will. But if you only play this game or this type of game once every 6 months, you will have to relearn it. You will have to relearn, okay, how does this terrain vary from this terrain, and what are the special rules with this one and this one? Because there's like half a dozen or 8 terrains that you need to know that may come up on a map, and sometimes they're a little bit easier to distinguish than others. And I think that's part of the reason why you saw with Ragnarok, they're kind of going away from that a little bit, to streamline it out a little bit. So that if you only play it every 3 months, you don't have to relearn it. Something like that that's going to make it a little bit easier to get to the table. And I applaud them for doing that and not overcomplicating things. I was afraid that this Kickstarter was going to be more like the first one, where the all-in was $500, where you were having to choose which ones you got and which ones you really didn't get. Because, frankly speaking, if it was $500, I would not, I'll tell you right now, be doing an all-in, period. I just wouldn't be. I would be much pickier. Now, mid-2s, 3? It's going to be tempting, like I said. Or I may do the pay for this pledge now, upgrade in the pledge manager, split the price. I'm a big fan of doing that in these scenarios, in these triple digit, especially miniature heavy games. That helps me personally digest them. So, are there comparable games for, 30 to 50% of the price? Absolutely. Is there probably anything that emulates this quite that way, though? No. You are paying for what you get with this Kickstarter. You are. And sometimes you want to pay more to get that more experience. And sometimes you don't. And frankly speaking, whichever side of things you fall, I think that's completely okay. Because this isn't for everybody. This is for me. It's not for other people necessarily that do not have the same interests. I've said that plenty of times. Do what makes you happy. So if this one makes you happy, it's probably going to make you even happier. If the first one didn't do it for you, though, there's nothing in this one that's probably going to change your opinion of it. There's nothing that's going to make you look at this one differently, except the theme being the biggest departure. If the Norse theme tickles your fancy, then you might be in trouble. But otherwise, if you passed on the first one, you did not like the first one, this is an easy pass for you on the second one. So, just more food for thought. And just to be clear, like I said, however many more stretch goals get unlocked, and I'm assuming they're going to make it, just, thinking from a marketing standpoint, very similar to the pledges from Pantheon. That's why I feel like you can make a relatively safe decision right now, as opposed to waiting until the end of the campaign. I don't think there's going to be any other significant stretch goals that are going to be make it or break it for you. I just don't. Especially with how they're presenting all of the pledges and all of the expansions right now. So, just good information to know. As always, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. If you liked it, there'll be more coming this way soon. So, as always, stay classy. Hope to see you around.